Welcome to Headliners Forum. We're here to bring you the best in Texas journalism, the stories behind the great stories. I'm your host, Mark Morrison. Our special guest is Kelly Wiley of KXAN-TV Austin. Kelly and her station's investigative team won a Certificate of Merit in the Foundation Showcase Competition for Excellence in Storytelling. Her four-part series called The Exit, Teachers Leave, Students Suffer, reported on record resignations and resulting shortages of qualified teachers as districts tried to reopen schools coming out of COVID shutdowns. Kelly, congratulations on your outstanding work. We all know how many students lost valuable education with COVID shutdowns and mandates, but as schools tried in 2022 to recover from COVID, they encountered a huge spike in teacher resignations and retirement. What was the extent of the problem?
The problem was pretty severe if you ask any of the people who were running these schools and the teachers who were in the classrooms, but the numbers also tell such a striking story. Usually TEA keeps data on attrition, or for a better word, the amount of retirements, the amount of resignations that happen any given year. And usually you'll see it jump down, but if it goes up, it's by a few thousand. The difference between the year before we were looking at the data and the year of the most recent data, it jumped by, double, triple that. We saw 42,000, more than 42,000 teachers retire or resign that year. And we just saw new numbers that the TEA released that show an 8,000 number jump from that. So the problem continues.
Right. Those are staggering numbers, and many teachers have long felt undervalued, underappreciated, and certainly underpaid. How is the pay issue especially powerful as inflation has soared and demands on teachers have increased?
Well, I think we all felt how our economy has changed throughout the pandemic. Rent has gotten much, much higher. It's been harder to buy a home for many people, and those teachers are experiencing those same challenges. The issue that's going on in schools is that their salaries have really not been able to meet that inflation at all. The last time teachers in Texas got a considerable raise was in 2019 with House Bill 3. And even when you talk to teachers about that jump, they remember it. It was significant enough to remember, but they said it really didn't change much for them. And so now you're looking at teachers who told us in exit forms, or who were telling their bosses in exit forms, that they could no longer afford to be teachers. They couldn't pay their rent. They were having to get additional jobs, taking any additional work they could. It was becoming untenable even for the most passionate educator.
All right. Of course, the shortage of teachers itself causes the teachers who stay to have more work. I mean, the job still remains to take care of the students, and this is part of the problem too. What are some of the increased demands on today's teachers?
Well, I think it comes from what you described, which is this domino effect. When one educator leaves, it stresses the system even further. So especially when you're talking about these tested subjects like math, like science classes, these are things that those kids have to take exams on, and that can impact their time there in school, and maybe even, well, definitely after. So what you saw were classes doubling up. You were seeing them trying to rely more and more on these teachers who, they're not teaching, basic level math, they're teaching, algebra, they're teaching chemistry, they're teaching physics. So they were having to double up a lot of classes. And it became a really stressful situation for the teachers, but also for the students. But another part of the burden on teachers is what's coming from legislators. There was a bill, HB 4545, every teacher I talked to is talking about, because it was a bill that was meant to catch students up from the pandemic. Anybody who failed the STAR or didn't take it, all of a sudden had to be in these, small groups, 3 people with a teacher to catch up. But it really wasn't built into the law how that would happen. So it was happening after school. They were trying to take volunteers. They were paying teachers a fee, but maybe, well, definitely not what they would have been making just for a regular school day. So it became more work.
How did the top teachers you talked to describe the strain they are under?
Well, one teacher we talked to, we named the story within the exit, the teacher who stayed. And this is a teacher who's, I think, the oldest teacher at her school. She's been there forever, very experienced. And she talks about how she was so stressed at one point that she almost quit and just said, I'm going to retire earlier than I thought. And so I think it's important to remember that it's not just teaching is a stressful job problem. It was really a buildup of trying to catch kids up, watching the teachers around them struggle financially. It was taking on additional roles. And I think every school district was handling legislative mandates a little bit differently. So you were seeing a different result depending on which campus you were on.
Right. And the pressure on their paycheck with the higher costs of groceries and housing, as you mentioned. You know, I've noticed one of the teachers you interviewed was trying to supplement her income by doing Uber driving nights and weekends to make ends meet on top of all the additional responsibilities that the teachers have. How are school districts across Texas addressing the alarming teacher shortage? Substitute teachers is one way, and that's not a particularly good solution for students.
No, not at all. I mean, during our reporting, we learned that there was also a substitute shortage. So it was kind of two issues happening at the same time. But school districts are trying their best. They have, for instance, Austin ISD, we've seen recently, basically have gone into their savings to account for higher raises for teachers because they saw that in our legislative session, at least our regular session, there wasn't any significant legislation that would have given them additional resources to give raises to teachers. So we're seeing school districts right now having to figure out their budgets, having to incentivize teachers who are on the fence, but there's not really been any significant movement in that area in our regular session. We are expecting to see a special session, but school districts are struggling right now, from what I understand.
All right, so they're just they're really having to cope. Although this subject got a lot of attention in the legislative session, and some proposals were made, right?
Yes, a lot of proposals were made. We saw what I'm describing as super bills that had lots of things jammed into it. There were changes to the mandatory salary minimums, which is the minimum amount you could pay a teacher with a certain level of experience. And we didn't just see them try to raise those salary minimums, but also diversify it differently. So now instead of saying for 1 year, for 2 years, it was saying for 0 to 5 years, 5 to 10. It was also accounting for if you went through a mentorship program. They were trying to create a mentorship program that would have given stipends to the older, more experienced teachers who were mentoring, but would also have started those teachers that came out of that program at a higher salary. So it was incentivizing, creating more partnerships to keep people in education.
This is a story that you continue covering with the new school year just a couple months away. What is the outlook for retaining and recruiting teachers across the state? Is there any relief on the way?
I think from what I could gather from listening to all of the legislative hearings, this is definitely on their mind. It's kind of crazy that it didn't result in some sort of bill, some sort of significant bill, but it's definitely on their mind. And in this upcoming special session that we're expecting on education, it's definitely going to be a topic. But as far as school districts now, from what I'm hearing, they're in the same space, if not more, more stretched, because this is the result of year over year, people leaving to go take other jobs outside of the profession, and maybe even to a neighboring school district that pays a little bit more, the cost of living is a little bit less. So At this point, it doesn't look great for school districts. They don't have a lot of resources, and they're trying to make sure they're still delivering the best.
We expect a lot of college kids who are interested in journalism to be watching this interview. What words of advice would you give to students who are interested in having a career like you have and covering important issues?
I would say don't limit what you can do, even in the current setting that you're in. I went to an investigative conference, and one of the speakers was a college student who had investigated this big story on his campus. It's a story that I would kill to do anywhere. And here he was doing it right on his campus. One of the people that we interviewed for our story, who's now in college, she was a student reporter, and we pulled a lot from her reporting, things that she was noticing at the time and writing up, things that we had missed that she found. So I would say the main part of this is being curious, asking questions, realizing that if I can write a public information request, you can too, and they legally have to give you those documents. So I think, reach out to local reporters and we can kind of help you with the tools, but you exist, you're a person, and there are things around you that you have greater access to than we do. So start where you are, it would be my advice.
Right. Well, that's great advice. And Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. Your reporting brought new insights to one of our society's most pressing problems. We're delighted to give some attention to your excellent journalism.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
On our site, headlinersfoundation.org, you can link to KXAN's award-winning stories and to interviews with other outstanding Texas journalists. For my colleague and Headliners Forum producer, Gary Pickle, I'm Mark Morrison.